We have 3 beautiful children, Madison, who's 9, Reagan, who's 6.5, and little Hannah just turned 4.
Hannah met all of her infant milestones. She sat up independently for the first time when she was 8 months old. I had written in my journal that at 14 months she wasn't walking independently yet, but loved to walk and took large, quick strides, hanging on to all the furniture, and that I bet within 2 weeks she'd be walking independently. We had absolutely no concerns at all that there could be any health issues with Hannah. When she was 2 years, 5 months old, it was in August, my mother noticed that her left arch seemed to be rolling inward. So I took her to an orthopedist, took her to a podiatrist, and everyone assured us, she'll be fine. By the time her 3-year appointment came, both arches were now engaged and her gait had become awkward. So my pediatrician immediately gave us a referral to see a pediatric neurologist, and about the same time we saw a pediatric geneticist. Our pediatric neurologist here in Albany really felt that she had giant axonal neuropathy. It was really by complete accident that he stumbled upon the diagnosis. When a slew of tests had come back normal, we met with him for a second time, and he brought a huge textbook into the exam room, opened to the neuropathy section. Hannah has no reflex from the knee down, so he really felt that she had some type of peripheral neuropathy. And he flipped to that section and started skimming and turned a couple pages, and there was a picture of a little boy with really kinky curly hair standing in his underwear, and he had the AFO braces on that go to just under the knee. And he was thin, pale skin, kind of had a more pronounced forehead, and he looked at me and he said, "Don't you think this kind of matches Hannah's phenotype?" And I said, "Well, that kid's muscles seem to be atrophied. Hannah's muscles aren't atrophied." And I wanted to just be in denial. It was more comforting. And he actually sent us to Columbia Presbyterian Children's to have a follow-up there. And on March 24th, we got the diagnosis that Hannah has giant axonal neuropathy. And 3 days later, we met with our geneticist and a genetic counselor for hours. And we really learned how grim a diagnosis this actually was.
Giant axonal neuropathy is a rare neurological disorder that impacts every nerve cell in the body. This degenerative disorder generally appears in infancy or early childhood and slowly progresses as injury to nerves becomes more severe. Signs of the disorder usually begin in the peripheral nervous system, which controls the arms and legs. Hearing and vision problems may also occur. As it progresses, the central nervous system becomes involved and causes a gradual decline in mental function, total paralysis, and seizures. Death usually occurs in the 2nd or 3rd decade of life.
After learning that really her stem cells that we had preserved from the umbilical cord at birth, as well as my middle child's stem cells that we preserved at birth, really probably wouldn't ever be able to be used to be able to treat this type of condition. So basically I finally looked at her and said, "So you're telling us that this is a death sentence?" And she said yes. And it was the single most devastating moment of our lives. And for a couple days we walked around in complete shock, disbelief, anger, devastation. And then Matt just looked at me and he said, "Someone has to be the first. Someone has to be the first to be cured."
It's an orphan disease. There's no funding, there's no research, there's no support group. The patients don't know where the other patients are. People can't talk about this with anyone. Neurologists who practice for 30 years never see patients that have this. So it's a death sentence. And the doctors give you the death sentence, and then you have to learn to cope with it. And we just can't accept that. One of the promising things that we've learned is that there's a researcher at Stanford who believes that the GAN pathway is one of the easier ones to fix the mutation for. and she was on track to hopefully find a treatment and or a cure, but her funding ran out about 1.5 years ago. So we need to jumpstart that. We need to find the money, fundraise again, get this foundation going, and get her back on track because she has the people in place. And then she's also contacted the Chinese government, who has told her if she gets the funding here, they will fund a clinical trial in China. So that's the most promising thing we've heard.
Right.
We've also spoken to the people at Columbia Presbyterian, and they're willing to do a clinical trial with already approved FDA drug compounds. So maybe there's a treatment where we can extend the good years for these kids in the hopes of finding a cure. I think there's no funding, no research, no organization because the numbers are so small. But it doesn't make it insignificant. When a doctor gives you a death sentence for your child.
The first night, I cried myself to sleep just saying, why couldn't this be MS? Why couldn't this be muscular dystrophy? Because there's so much money and so much funding and clinical trials and hope for breakthroughs with those disorders. And those disorders are actually a lot more complex. From my understanding, the whole genetics of those disorders, I believe that multiple gene mutations are involved, where the researcher that we're working with in Stanford had said, you know, this is one gene and it's not a complex gene pathway. And she got the funding because people understand that once they can fix an easier pathway, that it will likely lead to a lot of breakthroughs to fix more complex neurodegenerative disorders that already have lots of funding.
We don't know why there hasn't been a GAN organization or a foundation or a support group. We don't know why, but there isn't. So we're starting the first one, and we need help. We need people to give us money so we can save our daughter's life. This is your worst nightmare because they've given us the worst news about our baby, and there's nowhere to go, and we're starting at the bottom, and we need help. And we're not doing anything that anyone else wouldn't do for their kids, but we need help. We need money. We have a plan, but we need people to help us out.